You are listening to the Prosper Law Podcast. Learn how to reduce stress, have more time, and make more money. Come on in.
I'm Greg McCollum, and I built a 7-figure criminal defense law firm. I formed Prosper Law to show criminal defense law firm owners who are desperate for success how to grow from under $200,000 to $1 million and beyond. Hi, Greg McCollum here with another edition of the Prosper at Law podcast. Prosper at Law is a lawyer coaching program where I show criminal defense lawyers how to solve problems, how to do what you need to do to grow your law firm, stop doing things that are not helping you grow your law firm. And then the whole idea is, why do you want to grow your law firm anyway? Should you grow it? Should you do that? And there's another podcast about that, about should you enter a coaching program? Should you join a coaching program? Should you join a coaching program like Prosper at Law? It depends on what you want, but that's another topic. That's another podcast. For today, I'm going to talk about F clients and A clients, and to a lesser extent, B and C clients, and what is an A client and what is an F client. And most of the focus on that is F client, because that's the problem. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, and you've probably heard of that. And that's the idea where 80% of your problems come from 20% of your clients. So the small group of clients, certainly F clients, they create a drag on everything. They create problems. And then the other thing is, under the Pareto principle, is that the good side is that you're going to get 80% of your revenues, 80% of your money, from 20% of your clients. And so once you understand that and focus on that and are able to identify that, then your life improves. Your problems go away, because the problems are created by these so-called F clients. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term F client or not. There's another podcast that I did where I talk about A players as workers, as staff members, or team members as we call them, and A players, which is the best team member, the best staff member, the best employee that you could ever have, and that those are life-changing. So A clients they're not as life-changing as A players in your law firm. They're good though, because they do what they need to do to help themselves and help you help them. So it's very important to be able to identify them. And some of this too is that you know, when you're signing a client up, there's red flags. Sometimes I call it a yellow flag, because we're not sure where this person is going to land. So you've probably heard of this, but the Pareto principle is, as I said, 80% of your money comes from 20% of your clients. 80% of your problems come from 20% of your clients. And the Pareto principle is interesting, because Pareto, I think, was an economist. He was a professor in Italy in 1906. And the way this started is that he just did a study or survey and found out that 20% of the people in Italy owned 80% of the wealth. And I don't know how he got into that, but that's what he did. So he's just studying the population and the distribution of wealth. So when he discovered this, He then went to some other countries, this was in 1900, and discovered that the same thing was in those countries as well. Then later, a management consultant named Joseph Duran developed the concept of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, and applied it to other things. And he studied it, and then he found out that this 80-20 rule also applied to other things. So it could apply to business, it applies to really almost everything. And if you really want to read about this, you can Google it, search it, and there's just a Wikipedia article, and it goes through all of the different industries or all the different situations or patterns where this applies. And it goes on and on and on where people have applied it to a lot of different things in life. And so I know if you're listening to this and you're a lawyer, you question everything and want to know, well, is that true? So rather than me prove it to you, it's widely accepted. You can do your own research, which you're capable of doing, and you can see how this has been applied in different principles. And in terms of the 80-20 rule, that's just really the starting point. It's not math, right, exactly. It is patterns that are observable, that exist. It's not something where somebody's trying to make it fit. It fits, but it may be a 90-10 rule, or it may be an 87-13 rule, but it's been applied for over 100 years, over and over, to different situations, and has a recognized validity. So if you take this and talk about clients, and you've got clients, if you have a criminal defense law firm like I do, then you're talking to potential new clients. Hopefully, you're talking to potential new clients every day. Hopefully, you've got people calling your law firm because they have a criminal defense law issue where they've been arrested or they're being investigated or something like that. And so they need you, and so they're calling you. And when you start looking at your ideal client persona and people that you're trying to attract, then you don't want to just attract everybody. If you run your law firm where you say that anybody who's been arrested for anything in my geographic area, anybody who's been arrested for anything who has the money to hire me is qualified as a client, then what you're going to do is you're going to get some F clients in the door, and they're going to cause problems, serious problems. And they're going to be a drag on your law firm and your resources. And then what happens is, because you're spending so much time putting out their fires and trying to work through their issues, that the clients that are good clients are being neglected. I remember talking to this guy I knew that was a bank president, and I forget what he called me, but there was some term like I was the good silent bank customer that got neglected, and that there was that's in the banking industry too, apparently. So we've gotten pretty good at recognizing F clients, and probably because we've had so many of them. And it's a terrible experience. It's a terrible experience for them, the F client. It's a terrible experience for my staff, people, the lawyers and non-lawyers that deal with them and have to try to work with them. And then what you find is that you're always talking about them. You're always, they dominate the conversation because they're so they're so difficult that really on a weekly basis, at times a daily basis, everybody in my law firm was working on solving their problems. And so the best thing to do is not have them. And so you have to get to a point, and this is also a function of marketing and sales, you have to get to a point to where you're not so desperate to get a client, you're not so desperate to sign a case and get some money in the bank, because you have a pipeline of other cases coming in. And that's a function of marketing, and then also, conversion, which is selling. And that's something that you have to accept as well, but that's a whole nother podcast as well. So one of my mentors would call it he was a lawyer and he had a coaching business, and he would call it when they start waving the crazy flag. So when they start waving the crazy flag, you need to spot it. Now there's also the idea or the issue or the problem of turning them down. I think that some of the worst reviews we've gotten, some of the worst Google reviews we've gotten, are people that we didn't represent, because when we told them we could not help them, when we told them in the kindest way possible they were not a good fit, sometimes they go give you a 1-star review and talk about how terrible you are, because they're F clients, they're damaged people, and then they're hurt. They feel it damages their self-esteem that you won't help them, you won't represent them. And I've gone through that a number of times, and my staff and people were concerned about it. And I said, well, listen, this is really good. This is a blessing, because this is the way it would have been. And then a criminal case will last, in our jurisdiction, a criminal case will last a year and a half, sometimes more. And so this would have been our life for that whole time period that we're trying to help that client. So for me, and I think for you and for everyone, taking that pain up front, even if you get a bad review, even if the people walk out and they're furious with you, it's still better, because you have the one big blow up, and then it goes on, because they're off to find another lawyer to harass and blame. There was one client that we got that I really had a lot of compassion for him, because he seemed like he was a good person, but everywhere he went, he caused problems. And at one point he was homeless, but he was living in his car, and then he was living in his car with his brother. But he was always very clean and well spoken, but he just had so many issues, and he was so bad that he was going to a church, and he created so much controversy there that they banned him from the church. They wouldn't let him go to the church. And I remember one time he showed up at our office, and this is probably the 30th time he showed up. He just walk in with his issues and expect everybody to drop everything and take care of him and focus on him. And so he comes into the office, and it was so bad at that point, and we were trying to get his case resolved, but then he would get a new issue and expect us to do that. But it was so bad at that point that, and I'd never done this before in my life, I gave him a no trespass notice. We had on letterhead with basically the no trespass, like you're not allowed to come back to our office. If you come back to our office, you now have notice that you're trespassing, and so ultimately the police would be called and you could be arrested. Now he was familiar with that, because this happened to him all the time. Wherever he went, he had no trespass notices, and so I really felt bad for him, but not bad enough to let him ruin our life, because that doesn't accomplish anything, and ultimately it doesn't really help him that much either, because we get him out of one thing and he's in another thing, and we get him out of that and he's in another thing. And so he's exhibiting all these characteristics. of an F client. And so I want to be as kind as possible with him. And so I'm not threatening him. I'm not telling him I'm going to call the police. I'm not doing anything. Now, the police would show up at our office building because he would be wandering the halls or the stairwells, and the bank people would call. And so the police showed up a lot, and we would try to diffuse the situation because we didn't want him to be arrested. And so we intervened many times where we said, no, he's a client of ours. He's supposed to be here. He's leaving. You know, if he offended somebody, we're sorry, and that sort of thing. And we kept him from getting arrested. But on this particular day, it had gotten so bad. So I was really nice to him. I said, listen, how you doing? I just want to walk you downstairs to your car. And so I explained to him, I said, this is a no trespass notice. And what this means is that you can't come back here. And if you come back here, you now have notice. And so you've been served legally. And so if you come back here, then we would be forced to call the police to enforce this. And I don't know what the police will do. We don't really want it to create more problems for you. But you just have to understand that we're not representing you anymore, excuse me, and so you can't come back. So I walk him down, and I say it to him just like that, okay? And so he's in the car, I think, with his brother, and so I've got some cash on me. So I said, listen, you know, I know you guys are having problems and struggling because he couldn't keep a job or whatever. He'd always get terminated or not show up or something like that. So I gave them $100 cash, you know, as a goodwill gesture, just to say, okay, here, hopefully this will get you, you know, through a day or two or a week or something. And so what happens? They're so angry and hurt that they give us a terrible, terrible review. Okay, they go on Google and talk about what scumbags we are. And what a terrible person I am, and don't ever hire me. All right, and that's fine because at that point he's out of our life, and we're able to actually function because there were times we could not function. Now, the other thing about the F client is it doesn't mean that they're homeless people. It doesn't mean that they're impoverished. It doesn't even mean that they're necessarily law-abiding people, like in my practice area. I represented someone who was charged with home invasion, armed robbery, that went to trial, and he was also charged with murder on a separate case that I didn't have. And so this guy, people were afraid of him. They moved him from the Georgetown County Detention Center to the detention center in Horry County in Conway, J. Reuben Long, because I went to visit him. They said he's not here. We moved him. I said, what do you mean you moved him? He's awaiting trial. They're like, we moved him to Conway, and what'd you do that for? And they said, well, the guards are afraid of him. And then in Conway, I remember there's this thing they call the Green Mile, where they have all these people in lockup behind these glass windows. And this had never happened to me either, but those people that when I walked by there, they were making faces at me and grabbing their crotch and stuff. And I'd never seen that before. I walked right back by there with him, and they all like stood up. Like they stood up, like they in the military or standing up for the so I don't know. So they stood up, and they're all just looking at the ground. And I said something to him about that, and he always just would blow it off. But that guy was an A client, okay? He exhibited all the characteristics of an A client. And whenever I went to see him, he was positive, he was happy. He was really somebody that I enjoyed being with because he was an A client. Now, he was also, someone that people were afraid of. And they ended up moving him from the Conway jail back to Georgetown because the guards in Conway developed this fear of him. And so anyway, he went back. We tried his case. Amazingly, we won his case. And then it worked out his murder plea, and he got time, but it held him in jail for so many years that he really didn't have that much more time to do. But he was an A client. Now, I've had some of the worst clients I've ever had. One comes to mind. It was a medical doctor, okay? So this person is a medical doctor, brilliant F client, all right? And created so many problems, and really to this day still calls the office. The case has been closed for 2 or 3 years, and then there were other cases that arose that we refused to handle because we were just trying to close the case out. We didn't withdraw because of the fear of giving the money back, and that's what it came down to. So, but to this day, that person calls our office and threatens us and tells us we didn't do things right. So it's not necessarily a function of where the person is in society. The person could be a medical doctor, the person could be impoverished. It doesn't matter. They're either an F client or they're not, an A client or not. So what is an F client? And when I started making this list out, I came out with about 16 characteristics, which is amazing because this came to me because I've experienced all of this. So what is an F client? Does not trust you, questions your fees, argues with your advice, mistreats your staff, accuses your staff of being rude, starts arguments with your staff on the phone, teaches you the law and explains to you what the law is, goes and gets legal advice from other people. It could be friends, relatives, or other lawyers, threatens to fire you, demands a refund, does not show up to appointments on time or not at all, shows up at your office without an appointment, and also, you'll see this, walks into the first consultation with a pile of documents, a filing cabinet size full of documents everywhere stacked up that you must read now. That's a flag if you see that. Talks over you and tells you their misery story repeatedly. So when somebody tells us what's wrong or how this affected them, that's fine. We need to know that. But we don't need to hear it 20 times. And this person will just do that. And this is a good one too. You'll see this. They speak badly of other lawyers. When they come in saying, oh, so-and-so screwed me over, that person that, blah, 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 that's a red flag. Gets into arguments with friends and family, people that are with them in their life, and fighting, arguing in front of you in your conference room. Also, this is a big one where they won't talk to your staff. They won't talk to your paralegals. They won't talk to your secretary. They want to talk to the lawyer. I got to talk to the lawyer. They lie to you. I guess that's a given. Another one, too, which is a huge red flag, and this has happened to me a couple times, and if it ever happens again, I'm firing the client. They pray for you in the consult. Okay? I believe in prayer. I'm not opposed to prayer, but if a client comes into my office, a potential client, and says he wants to pray for me, I'm firing him, okay? Because every time this has ever happened, I ended up, after suffering for a long period of time, and given a refund. I think the last person that prayed for me, we represented him for 2 years, almost had the case resolved, and I wrote him a check for $25,000 or $26,000 to avoid a fee dispute. Okay, so that was the person that prayed for me. The other thing they do is they try to intimidate you. They threaten you, if you don't do this, and another thing which is not even on my list, but they'll argue about how much they paid you. They talk about all this money they paid you, but usually they didn't pay it all. Usually they didn't. Usually it's somebody that you cut the fee for to try to get them on board, and now they're bringing up how much money they paid you, and it's usually not a lot. So what's an A client? An A client list is short, pays the fees, pays as agreed, follows your advice, gets you the information you need when you ask them to do it. If you need something from them, they get it to you. Shows up to appointments on time, treats your staff with respect, and also when something's wrong, they ask questions or bring up issues and do not just go around suffering in silence, waiting for that to explode and create a big issue. So they tell you when there's a real problem. They also know the difference between urgent and important. If something's important, they'll bring it up, they'll ask for a consultation, they'll ask for a phone conference or something. They understand that just because something's important, it doesn't have to be, they don't have to tell you this minute. They don't have to come rushing into your office, or they don't have to call and demand that somebody get you out of a meeting because they have to tell you this. It's important, but they know the difference. I also went through what is a B client and what is a C client. And I don't know if I should even go over it, because I don't know that if when you look at this and when this has been taught to me and when I've thought about it, I don't know that you can really, I don't know that you could accurately define a B client. I don't know that I could accurately define a C client. I think it's easier to define an A employee, an A player, and then a B player, and then a C player and a D player and an F player. That's definable in my mind, and that's something that I think there's another podcast I did which talks about that. But the B clients are just a little bit not quite as good as the A client. When I was trying to think, well, a C client exhibits, some of these characteristics, I think that makes them an F client, because if they exhibit just a couple of those traits or characteristics or behavior patterns that I went through, if they do just a couple of them, then as a law firm, we're either not going to onboard them or we're going to fire them. We're going to dump them. And I don't care how much money I have to give them back. I don't care if we worked on the case and we lost money. It's so much more economically profitable for me to write them a check and try to get out of the relationship than for them to disrupt my entire law firm for the next 2 years. And so normally we're able to catch them. I think if you think about this concept, you'll see in your practice that these red flags come waving them very early. If the person that answers your phone was walking down the hall to get a coffee and they're talking about, this guy just said this to me, or this woman just said this, that's probably it. Because if you listen, they're normally just talking about, we need to open a file or we need to set something up. If they're already describing some kind of aberrant behavior, some kind of problem, some kind of issue, these things come up very, very early. And so the key is to fix your marketing, fix your sales and onboarding glide path so that you're not desperate for their money and you're able to avoid them. And you will make a lot more money, be a lot happier, have a lot less problems, be able to help all your other good clients if you don't represent them. And it's not a badge of honor to be able to say difficult clients, difficult cases. From my perspective, you're not really doing something that you should seek to do. Difficult clients, difficult cases. I know some people are very proud of that. I was somebody that was very good at it, handling these monsters, but we stopped doing it. And that's the information that I can share with you, and that's what I think. And so take it for what it's worth. Thank you for listening to another edition of Prosperate Law Podcast. See you next time. If you want to know more, go to prosperatelaw.com. We show criminal defense law firm owners how to reduce stress, have more free time, and make more money. Thanks for listening.